Not all Hall of Famers are created equal. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the 16 T206 Hall of Famers that have just one single card in the greatest baseball card set ever released. We'll also theorize around why. Why were these players, the greatest of their era, only included one time in the T206 set? But now, before we begin, let's get some personal details out of the way. My name is Chris, otherwise known on Instagram and X as at CRT_Sportscards. If you're new to T206, welcome. This is the best channel for you here on YouTube, so do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button. But if you were a returning viewer, welcome back. Now, before we talk about those 16 Hall of Famers, I did have just a little bit of personal news to share when it came to what happened last weekend here in Seattle. I had the special privilege of having the Topps media team fly out to Seattle to do an interview with myself. A few months back, I did a print interview with Greg, and then that morphed into this video episode and video interview. So I expect in some time of maybe mid to late April, Topps will have a video not only about the T206 set, but a journey and a story around my personal journey around collecting T206. It was weird for me to give up editing control of a video, to sit there and just be interviewed for over 3 hours, but shout out to Brandon and team. I really appreciate the opportunity, because the more people who know about T206 will make this set even better, because as I said earlier, this is the greatest baseball card set ever released. Now, getting back to these specific 16 Hall of Famers and the topic at hand, this will be a two-part video. I didn't want to create a 30-minute video, so this first part will be who the players are, the timeline of their careers, and then number 3, in my opinion, what group they fall into and why they only have one card in the set. The other part of the video will be talking about these 16 players, talking about their most available card, their hardest to come by card, and as well talking about all the different backs in the card. So hit that subscribe button so you're notified when the second part of this video comes out here very soon. But now, who are the 16 players? Who are those 16 Hall of Famers that just have that one card in this set? So starting from the top of the alphabet here, we have Home Run Baker, Jake Beckley, Jack Chesbro, Eddie Collins, Jimmy Collins, George Davis, Hugh Duffy, Elmer Flick, Joe Kelly, Iron Man McGinty, Eddie Plank, Tris Speaker, Honus Wagner, Bobby Wallace, Ed Walsh, and ending the list here, we have Zach Wheat. So now, where did I even begin in this process to not only isolate these 16 Hall of Famers, but to then try to classify them into one of 5 different groups? So I will throw up on the screen right now this god-awful eye chart. What this chart is the years the players played the game. This is nothing to do with if they were a manager in the future after their career. This is specifically data from Baseball Reference on when they played. One key thing to remember as well, and this is a big misconception of T206 and the Hall of Famers. These players did not play at all the same time. Some players never overlapped over each other. A good example here is like Jake Beckley. He retired in 1907. Zach Wheat, his rookie year was 1909. Another good one here we have is Hugh Duffy. 1906 was his last year. Tris Speaker, 1907. So although all of them are a Hall of Fame list, they have a very, very different career. And seeing their years on a chart basically helped me figure out where each of these players landed and trying to understand why they have only one single card in the set, because this is the biggest mystery of the set. We do not have the notes, we don't have the details behind the why. So here we are in 2025 and beyond, trying to understand the why behind every single card. So now here are the 5 different groups that I've classified these players in based on their careers. Number 1, we have the chase cards. We have 2 players that have landed in this manufactured scarcity category, from my opinion. Number 2, we have 5 players falling into their career has already ended at the point of this release in 1909. We have another 3 players whose careers are basically essentially over. Another 3 players fall into, they're pretty good players at the time, but they didn't get a second card. And then the last group is another 3 players. These are the rookie guys. These are guys who are within a 1 or 2 years just starting out their career. A key remembrance here is, at this time, there was no Hall of Fame. So the idea that they were making a Hall of Fame card didn't make any sense to them, because that term didn't exist back in 1908, 1909. But number 1, which 2 players, which 2 Hall of Famers fall into the chase card category? That, of course, would be Eddie Plank and Honus Wagner. I do not believe for 1 second that the Wagner was short printed because he didn't like tobacco, or Eddie Plank's plate broke. Both of these cards were printed over a couple of different printings. Neither story, in my opinion, today hold any water. You can, and you're welcome to believe any folklore from the past, but I still fully believe now and until probably my last day that Wagner and Plank were simply chase cards. They were short printed in the set to sell cigarettes. These were some of the absolute best players in the game at that time. You want to sell more cigarettes to kids? You give out 1 Wagner for every 1,000 cards you put out. That's going to make the kids buy more cigarettes, and adults. It's just like today with the modern game and the modern boxes of cards. It's all about the chase. Now, the funny part, though, is because of this with Eddie Plank was a phenomenal pitcher. One of the greatest pitchers of all time. But he's really, in a weird way, been lost to history. And I think it does have to do with this card being a chase card. Imagine if there were 4 Eddie Planks in the set. He might be talked about like Ty Cobb is today. This set is monumental. And the fact that this 1 card, along with the Wagner, are so short printed is why I feel Plank has essentially been lost to the record books. Now, these next 5 players that fall into the career has already ended category, I view their T206 cards as kind of a celebration of their career. They were really good years ago, but there really weren't cards around years ago. This is the real true first baseball card set. So these developers of T206 wanted to celebrate the past. And so for these 5 players, this card is a token really of appreciation for how great they were on the baseball diamond. So that group is led by Jake Beckley. Then we have Jimmy Collins, Hugh Duffy, Joe Kelly, and Iron Man McGinty. The interesting part here with Hugh Duffy is he actually is a 460 subject, so he wasn't released until the very, very end of T206. But if you wanted a nice small 5-card collection of Hall of Famers that didn't play the game during the time these cards were released, this is the set you go after. This is the 5 Hall of Famers that you want to add to your collection. Now, for this next group here, where I labeled them career essentially over, you could make an argument that they do fit in with the good player category, which is next. But because of when these players played their last year is why I separated them, and it's also based on how they were printed in the T206 set. All 3 of these players were only in the very first printing of T206. These 3 Hall of Famers are not in Polar Bear. Polar Bear, of course, was 350 and above from a printing group perspective, but the 3 players whose careers were essentially over at this point of release are Jack Chesbro, George Davis, and Elmer Flick. Chesbro and Davis' last year, 1909. Elmer Flick's, 1910. So that is why I deem them career essentially over versus in the good category or good player category. Now, let's be honest here. All of these players were really good, whether they ended their career in 1909 or played till 1930. But there was no Hall of Fame back then. So looking at the players in this, they were really good at the time these cards were released. We have Eddie Collins, we have Bobby Wallace, and then we have Ed Walsh. For Eddie Collins, 1909 was his 4th year of professional baseball. For Wallace, though, it was his 16th career, and for Walsh, it was his sixth year in professional baseball. So who knows why there was only one card printed of each of these really good players? Maybe they weren't marketable. Now, to counter that just a little bit here, Wallace and Walsh, those guys could probably maybe fit into that. They weren't marketable for sales of cigarettes. But you look at Eddie Collins, being in his 4th year of baseball, a guy who won, I want to say, 6 World Series starting in, I think, 1910 for the A's. He was in his 4th year. But 1906, 1907, he barely played any games. So he really was a blip on the radar. You start to see his career come to fruition in that 1908 season, but for whatever reason, there was never a need or a desire from the developers of ATC, or the developers from ATC, to create a 2nd or 3rd Eddie Collins card, because to me, that's one of the mistakes of the T206. Eddie Collins should most definitely have multiple T206 cards. And then ending the list here are 3 players where if you're doing a performance review and you just got hired, your review score would be too new to rate. So we have Home Run Baker, who just entered into his 2nd year of professional baseball. We have Tris Speaker, who is entering into his 3rd. And then the rookie of the group, we have Zach Wheat. Zach Wheat as well is a 460 subject in the T206 set. In Polar Bear, that is a harder to come by Hall of Famer. And that is because he just started playing baseball at the time. And so little did the developers know of T206 what the Zach Wheat card would mean now 115 years later. But it's really cool to think about these 3 players being developed from a card perspective, not knowing what their careers would turn out to be down the road. So now I'm curious, out of these 16 Hall of Famers, well, let's call it 14, because I'm not too sure how many of us who's watching this video own a Wagner or a Plank, but if you do, I would love to know, and I would love to see it in person one of these days. I've held a Wagner, but it was a very quick second at last year's National. I've never held a Plank, but I would absolutely love to hold both of those cards for more than maybe a few seconds. But in reality here, I'm curious, how many of these 14 Hall of Famers do you own right now in your collection, or how many are you planning to add now that you know the uniqueness of their story in the T206 set? As well, hit that subscribe button, because part 2 is coming up pretty soon, where we talk about the scarcity of their cards and which ones I would go after if I was starting this list over from scratch right now.